for joining us. We're going to just wait another minute or so for people to join, and we'll get started in a minute or so. Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We're excited to share the results of our new customer study, the Personalisation Perception Gap. For those not familiar with BoxEver, it's a personalisation platform that uses data and AI to help some of the world's biggest brands make every customer interaction smarter and transform customer experience. We work with the likes of Ryanair, Emirates, Viva Air Group, and AIB, and we're recognized by the likes of Forbes and Gartner as a leader in personalization globally. In essence, personalization is what we do. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share the link with you after this event, and we welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with others. We also invite your comments and questions. There's a QA chat box on your screen, and if you think of a question, you can type it in there and we'll try to answer that at the end of the webinar. We'll endeavour to answer all questions either today or as a follow-up individually. My name is Ruan. I'm the Director of Consulting here at BoxEver, and I'll be bringing you through the results of the survey today. First, a bit about the survey methodology. We partnered with You Gov to get inside the minds of 2,000 consumers and understand whether personalisation is really having an effect or having the effect that brands say it is. The survey was conducted by You Gov UK on behalf of BoxEver. The total sample size was just over 2,000 adults. The fieldwork was undertaken between the 22nd and the 23rd of October 2019. The survey was carried out online, and the figures have been weighted and are representative of the UK population of adults aged 18 and over. We got back a huge amount of data in our survey, and we spent some time breaking it down so we can take you through some of the most compelling findings today. There are 6 sections we're going to look at. The first is the attitudes towards the status quo. What do consumers think about the marketing and communication they currently get from brands? The second is perceptions of personalization. So what do consumers think about personalization today? Are they ready for it, and do they see value? The third thing we wanted to explore is around personal data and the value exchange. So how willing are consumers to hand over their personal data in exchange for personalization? And what conditions do they set? Buying behaviors. The personalization impact is about how personalization is impacting sales for brands. Is it affecting consumer behavior? The fifth was about the cost of poor personalization. What is the risk of getting it wrong? Is doing personalization badly more damaging than not doing it at all? Sixth was the role of true relevance, where we'll summarize some of our key insights, specifically relevance. In each of these sections, we're going to do three things. The first is we're going to run a poll with all of you to get your perspective on some of the questions we asked in the survey. Secondly, we'll go through the consumer data and be able to measure the perception gap between what the poll thinks and what we've collected live with you today. And finally, we'll discuss the implications for brands. What does all this mean for your business and how can you respond? Section 1 focuses on the attitudes towards the status quo. So before we get into the results, let's do our first poll. This poll asks the question, what percentage of consumers are frustrated by irrelevant marketing communication from brands today? So you should all see a poll on your screen, and we'll give a few minutes to answer that. The results are pretty encouraging so far. So I'm going to close that now in 5 seconds. So in terms of the group, over half, so 56% of you think the result is somewhere between 61 and 80%, and some less people think it is kind of 41 to 60. So what did we see in our poll? So we saw it actually very much in line with what your answers were. So our poll had, we asked customers how frustrating you find being sent communications or offers from brands and companies about products or services that you're not interested in. Actually, maybe the poll hasn't come back. 1 second, sorry. Oh, perfect. I think you guys can see the slides now. So we asked consumers how frustrating you find it being sent communications or offers from brands or companies about products or services that you're not interested in. I think the general message was that consumers are fed up with untargeted communication. As many of you know, the days of one-size-fits-all marketing campaigns are over. A lot of this relates to the way technology has transformed consumer expectations. Consumers have tasted a great customer experience from a lot of brands focused on making every single interaction relevant, timely, and engaging. And this data tells us that they now expect this as the norm. And the good thing, I guess, is that you guys on the webinar are of the same opinion, or you're pretty much aligned on your expectations. One reflection of this expectation is about telling people about things they've already bought. Consumers are fed up with unconnected experiences. They want to jump from one platform to another and expect that experience with a brand to do the same. So getting sent an ad for a holiday that you've just paid for is frustrating, and consumers expect better. It's also a pretty big waste of your marketing budget. What does this mean for your brands, and what should you be thinking about? So the first thing is, are you capturing your customer data? Delivering the right communication and marketing to customers has to start with a crystal clear understanding of each and every customer. What data are you collecting? How is this being organized and analyzed? Are you thinking about both live and historical data? A great customer experience is all about timely communication and has to respond in the moment. So that means you need to be collecting live data as well as historical information. Is your organization collaborating effectively to make consumer data joined up and usable? So it's no good collecting data in one team and not giving other parts of the business what they need in terms of access. Equally, collecting information twice in an uncoordinated way is costly and inefficient. Your marketing teams need to know when a customer has logged a request with your call center, for example, and it's got to be joined up. A CDP can make this process much easier. So do you have one in place, or are there steps that you need to take internally to make that happen? Section 2 is all about the perception of personalization. So what do consumers think about personalization today, and are they ready for it, and where do they see the value? So I'm going to open up the second poll now. And the question here is, what percentage of consumers are ready for more personalization? As I'm looking at these results coming in, it's a little bit different to the first poll in that the results are a little bit different to what we've seen. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. So if you want to get an answer in, then go for it. Okay, I'm going to close that poll. So the results from the poll are somewhere between 81 and 100%. So 44% of you guys think that consumers are ready for personalization, with a slightly more pessimistic view around the 50% mark. 41 to 60% of you think, or sorry, 32% of you think that it's around 41 to 60% of our poll respondents responded with this. But actually the results were slightly different to the expectations here. So we asked consumers if they were ready for more personalization across a range of channels. It turns out that they are, with 67% stating they are interested in receiving personalized content in more than one channel. They recognize the value it brings, and not only they recognize the value, but Salesforce recently found that 80% of consumers now say that an experience with a brand is as important as the product or services. Our data is more evidence of the importance of the experiences, and that personalization really does play a key role when talking to customers. Beyond contributing towards the transformation experience for customers, consumers also picked out a number of different ways in which personalization creates value for them. First was that it saves them money. So 41% of our respondents said that they would like personalization to be focused on saving them money. So they liked being sent deals and offers that can help them find the products or services they like at a reduced cost. The second was about time. Personalized ads mean less time wasted reading about products or services they have no interest in. It also helps them find new products or services. So personalization does a great job of bringing together the right brands with the right customers. Discovery adds value for both parties. It also means they get a sense of communication about things they have an interest in, and relevance is an important part of the value add. It's something we'll talk about more in later slides. It's interesting when we asked about channels to look at the channels where consumers prefer to see personalization. Email is way out in front at 51%. A lot of this might be to do with familiarity. A lot of brands have started with email when first testing personalization. It's meant that it's also had the most attention and has matured at a quicker rate than maybe other channels. There's an opportunity here to capitalize and do far more with email. I think we all recognize our inboxes could be far more relevant. Everything else is low by comparison, and we think website is probably an interesting one. It tells us not many brands are getting it right. So while email is possibly where you can double down and capitalize on consumer readiness, website personalization done well presents an opportunity to differentiate. We see a handful of drivers for this: a lack of connected experiences between the website and the other channels like email. A lack of identification on the website can lead to an anonymous experience. A lack of connection to backend data means that the customer, are not actually receiving relevant messaging. And fourth can be a focus on funnel optimization at the expense of personalization. Arguably, a customer should probably not be aware even that the website that they're on has been personalized to them, but lots of work to be done. So what does all of this mean for brands? I guess the questions that we're keen to ask are things like how much of your marketing activity in 2019 was customer focused as opposed to brand focused? How are you involving the customer how are you involving the customer in your marketing strategies? And how can you put a greater focus on them and not your brand? How mature is your segmentation? What demographic data are you making use of? How far does your segmentation go? Is one-to-one engagement an ambition? Where can personalization add the most value for your customers? What is your customer looking for? Is it a better experience? Is it more relevant offers and deals? Information about products or services they would like but have not yet discovered? And do you have a personalization strategy in place or plans to test and scale? So who owns personalization? Is there a plan in place to drive more value from personalization? And if not, how can you get it moving? Section 3 focuses on on personal data and the value exchange. So how willing are consumers to hand over their personal data in exchange for personalization? What conditions do they set? It's time for the third poll, so let me open that poll up. So the third poll asked the question, what percentage of consumers are willing to hand over their personal data in exchange for personalization? Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. So by far, I think you thought the range was in between 21 and 40%. So 41% of you guys thought that was the range. The second range was going to be 41 to 60. So 28% of you guys thought that. In terms of what we see, so we asked consumers, how willing would you be to share your personal data with brands in order to receive relevant communications based on your interests or shopping habits? So I think consumers remain quite cautious with data. So building trust will be critical for companies, which is probably not a surprise. Using data responsibly and looking after it securely will continue to be in the spotlight. But the interesting thing we found when we looked a little bit closer was that nearly half are willing to share are willing to hand over data for more relevant personalization. Again, this theme of relevance coming through in the data. There are some interesting differences in age groups when we looked at this question, which are maybe worth mentioning as well. So consumers aged between 18 and 34 are almost twice as likely to share personal data in exchange for personalized communication from brands than those aged 55 and older. I guess there's two possible reasons for this. One is you might not be surprised that younger consumers are happier to share data, which might be good news for personalization in the future. But in contrast, it might also mean that we all get a little bit more protective about our data as we get older. So with this in mind, what should you be thinking about? What are you doing to build trust within the consumers over how you use their personal data? Are you having an open and honest conversation with your customers about data? Have you turned GDPR into an opportunity or ignored the potential difficult problem? Is your data policy consumer readable or customer readable? No one likes the small print, so is your data policy easy to find in a written and clear and direct way? I personally really like the way Strava have done it recently to explain how they use data. I think it's a really good example of making it clear. Are you clear about how you collect personal data and what you use it for? How are you communicating with customers over what data you collect and what it's used for by your different teams? Is that hidden or is it clear? And how do you let your customers make decisions over what you do with their data? Does your audience span different age groups? Does your data policy reflect the customer base? And could you offer different options for different types of customers who might have different appetites for risk? How can you communicate the value exchange? Are customers clear about what they're getting back in exchange, or do they feel they're just giving up their data for your advantage? The next section is about buying behaviors and the effect of the personalization impact. So how is personalization impacting sales for brands? Is it affecting consumer behavior? So this is our penultimate poll, and let me open that up now. So the question is, what percentage of consumers would make a repeat purchase with a brand after receiving a personalized communication? I think we're about in the range, so let me close that poll and share the results. So in terms of what you guys thought the range was probably in between 61 and 80, so 44% of you thought that. The range, the secondly group was probably in between the range of 41 to 60, and 28% of you guys thought that was the case. I guess in this scenario, there's probably a case to be made that maybe everyone is right if you picked one of those two ranges. So we asked consumers, if you received a personalized offer or discount from a brand you've shopped with before, would this encourage you to shop again? And almost half said yes, they would make a repeat purchase. So I think personalization has a positive impact on buying behavior. It's strong evidence that the direct impact of personalization on sales, alongside the bigger long-term impact that great customer experience brings. What's interesting is that personalization drives repeat for nearly half. And again, relevance makes a key in pushing up this figure to 70%. This is a strong indication of how you can expect personalization to make a tangible bottom line impact. We'll talk about the difference in relevance in the next section. Another example of the positive impact of different buying behavior was impulse purchases. So personalization can drive results when a brand is both in front of mind following a recent purchase, and on a more spontaneous basis, driving impulse purchase, where 57% of consumers have made an impulse purchase after seeing a personalized offer. So again, what does this all mean for brands? So can you link the impact of your personalization to your marketing performance metrics? Can you measure the impact of personalization on things like brand awareness, website traffic, customer acquisition, and customer loyalty? Do you track the impact of personalization on customer buying behaviors? Can you then take this information one step further and see how personalization is directly impacting buying behaviors? Really core about measuring conversion in that instance. And can you measure and communicate the bottom line impact of personalization and communicate that to key stakeholders in the business? Can you use this information to make a case for prioritizing personalization and getting the time and resources to develop and implement a proper strategy if that's not already in place? Section 5, our last section, is about the cost of poor personalization. So what is the risk of getting this wrong? Does doing personalization badly, is it more damaging than not doing it at all? So our last poll, let me open that up for you guys now. So our last poll, we asked, we're asking, what percentage of consumers do you think would consider shopping elsewhere if they received a poorly personalized communication? Okay, I'm going to close that poll. I think the majority of you got this answer correct. So the majority of you guys think, 45% of you think that the answer is the range is somewhere between 61 to 80%. So a pretty big deal. And the second answer is 41 to 60%, which I think is in and around the range of what we're seeing in our results. So we asked consumers, if a brand or company sent you a poorly personalized communication, would you decide to shop somewhere else? A massive 67% said they would. So personalization done badly has the real potential to cost brands significantly. It may well be the case that personalization done poorly is worse than no personalization at all. And the opportunity presented by personalization is probably too large to ignore. But if you are going to do it, you have to get it right. So what does all this mean for brands? What should you be thinking about? Have you assessed the risks of doing personalization badly for your business? What long-term damage could you be doing by not getting this right? Are your personalization efforts part of a broader strategy? How is personalization framed within your organization? Is it still an afterthought, or is it being properly thought through across the business? Do you have the technology and organizational structure to make personalization work? Are there are there basics in place to make a success of personalization? And do you have the tech either built or bought to make it work? And is your business set up for success in terms of the way teams and departments are structured? Something we look at critically as one of the first steps with most of the brands that we work with. You would have seen that relevance can have a big impact on customers, and it was seen as a driving force for positive engagement. So we're going to focus a little bit about this in our last section because it was something that we saw when we looked at the data. When personalization from brands is also truly relevant, people are happier to receive it. They're more willing to hand over their personal data and more likely to spend their money. So what is true relevance with personalization? True relevance is where the personalization speaks to a consumer on a one-to-one basis, informed by live and historical data. It means that the communication takes into account the content. So how is it specifically relevant to the customer? The time, what is the best time to send this communication? The context, so what is the live context of this communication, and the channel? So what is the best channel to communicate to this customer? True relevance is created by this kind of one-to-one targeting and engagement. And this type of personalization, this is the type of personalization that will transform results for brands. Relevance emerged throughout as key theme throughout the survey. I guess 3 examples that we thought were worthwhile pulling out were that 78% of consumers are frustrated by relevant communications from brands. When relevance is not prioritized, brands are damaging their customer relationships. When communication from a brand is seen as relevant, consumer willingness to share data increases by 64%. That's a significant increase for such an important opportunity for brands. When communication from a brand is seen as relevant, consumers are 46% more likely to make a repeat purchase. Relevance will have a tangible impact on sales. To help bring this to life, we've got 2 examples of potential personalization. One we've called basic personalization on the left, and on the right we've got what we call relevant personalization. The difference in outputs, the difference is really in the outputs when you change the inputs. So the connected data and insightful-led actions can fundamentally change your customer experience. We cover this in a lot more detail in our personalization maturity curve guide, which you'll find available on the website. We can't stress enough the importance of true relevance in allowing personalization to reach its potential. It's not about moving through the levels of the personalization maturity curve. It's about moving through the levels of the personalization maturity curve to deliver the kind of engagement that will transform customer experience and positively impact your bottom line too. We'll send this as a follow-up, but to summarize the key takeaways from everything we've covered today, we think there's important questions that we as marketeers and brands need to be asking ourselves to create personalization that will deliver for today's consumers. The kind of key highlights we're calling out here are you capturing your customer data? Do you have a CDP in place? Do you have a personalization strategy in place? How much of your marketing in 2019 was customer focused? And this is a really good time of year to start to look at 2020 and what types of activity you're going to run next year. What are you doing to build trust with consumers over how you use their personal data? How do you communicate the value exchange for what they give you? Can you link the impact of your personalization and your marketing to your marketing performance metrics? Do you have the technology and organizational structure in place to make personalization work? And have you considered the impact of real-time decisioning engines? Where is your brand on the personalization maturity scale? And that's it for today. Thanks for your time. And if you'd like to know more about personalization and relevance, you can download a personalization maturity curve guide at the address on screen or by going to the Learn section of our website. There have been a few questions. I think there was a couple of questions about sound, but some more maybe direct questions. We'll follow up with those directly as from what I can see, they're quite specific. If you have any questions or you would like to contact us directly, you can reach out to us on the email address above or on Twitter or on LinkedIn. We answer on all of the channels in which you'll communicate with us. Thanks again for your time today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.